BS Free Witchcraft is a production of the Nerd and Tie Podcast Network. Nerd and Tie produces podcasts ranging from actual play to true crime, and you can find more at nerdandtie.com or join our Discord by going to nerdandtie.com/Discord.
To the other kids at St. Bernard Academy, they were the girls who didn't belong.
Whatever you do, stay away from them.
Why?
They're witches.
But after years of being on the outside...
Why'd you lie about me?
I don't want to go out with you again. Please, stop begging. It's pathetic.
4 girls are about to discover the dark side.
You ever heard of invoking the spirit? Black magic. We can make things happen. I mean, this is it. This is real.
Columbia Pictures welcomes you to the Witching Hour.
Welcome to BS Free Witchcraft, your monthly guide to the modern witchcraft movement, minus a lot of the, usual BS. I'm your host, Trey Dorn, and what you just heard there was part of the trailer to 1996's The Craft. The Craft is there's a generation of witches where The Craft is a very important film, and we're going to be talking about that movie today because it's a bigger deal than a lot of people realize, except for the people who do realize it. But before we get to that, and this is going to be a long episode, folks, before we get to that, a little bit of housekeeping. Every July, I like to do a feedback episode, and where I answer questions from you, the listeners. And if you want to get your email into me, if you want to get your questions in, there is a deadline, and that is July 15th. July 15th of 2020, which is when this episode is from. This episode is the June 2020 episode for people who listen to these, and you can disregard this in the distant future, I guess. But if you want to send something in, go to bsfreewitchcraft.com and click on the contact form and fill that out. And I read everything that gets sent in there, and I will get to your message. And I guess that's the housekeeping we need to do for this episode before we move into what is a lengthy discussion of the movie The Craft. And joining me this episode is the host of Hex Positive and the author of Grove Daughter Witchery, Brina Guerin.
Good morning. How are you?
And today we get to talk about The Craft today.
Oh boy. I've been looking forward to this. This is going to be so good.
So my great shame as a 39-year-old when we're recording this Wiccan is that I had actually never seen The Craft.
Mm-hmm. I have to admit, when you told me that, I sat back and laughed like a little harder than I probably should have, just because, we both came up in that time, and, you're in the Wiccan community, and that was like, I thought that was like required viewing.
I'm going to tell you something. Just because I hadn't seen the movie didn't mean I didn't have strong opinions on the movie for like a decade. Like, it took me forever to soften, so the problem, oh God, it's where to even start. The Craft, we cannot understate the importance of this movie in the modern witchcraft movement. And I feel like it's silly to say this random teenage horror movie. It's kind of horror. It's not scary. This teenage film from the 90s was this massive influence, but oh my God, it was. And I will tell you, researching this episode reopened so many memories, because people are still arguing about this movie on witchcraft communities today. They are still there are people who get really mad if you even point out that people got into witchcraft because of this movie. And I'm gonna tell you, The for some context of the reason why I never saw this movie, and but I had strong opinions, is because when this movie came out in 1996, I was already kind of in my year of study. So I was already like, I would call myself for those of you who don't know much about Wicca, to become a Wiccan, you're supposed to do a year of study before you either are initiated or self-dedicate. Just to make sure that, because in theory, if you're a initiated Wiccan, you should be able to talk about it with some authority, so you should learn what it is. You know, it doesn't mean you're not a witch during that first year. If you're doing witchcraft, you're a witch. But specifically, so that meant, though, like, I was, like, entrenched in this stuff, and the witchcraft community, the neo-pagan reaction to this movie was so extreme. because so many people, like, got interested in witchcraft because of it, and there was a massive backlash in the witchcraft community because all of these young women were trying to come in, and so everyone automatically, you had to have an opinion on this film if you were in witchcraft and it was the 90s. Like, you
Absolutely.
had to have an opinion. Like, you could get away without having an opinion on Practical Magic when that came out, but everyone had an opinion on The Craft.
Oh, yeah. I remember those days. I was not actually studying at the time, but I was extremely interested. I actually got in just a few years later when I was in college in the early 2000s. But yeah, that was like, The Craft was like the gateway drug for witchcraft. I mean, Charmed and Practical Magic, they were out around the same time. They were in there too. They were generating interest, but they were like firmly in that kind of rom-com chick flick category. So the witchy girls from my day, at least in my area, I'll say, they wanted to be edgy.
Yeah.
So there was a whole thing in my high school, actually, and later at college, where girls who looked goth or acted spooky or were even tangentially into witchy stuff were called crafters. And among themselves, it was like sort of a funny nudge, but the rest of us were like, ugh.
Yeah. So we should probably at least so the Craft, the film, like, to actually like say what the movie is, for those of you who aren't aware, it's a 1996 movie directed by Andrew Fleming, and it's about the main character, Sarah, has recently moved to Los Angeles and goes to a private school, and she ends up meeting these three other girls, Rochelle, Bonnie, and Nancy, who Nancy's kind of the leader, who are effectively trying to become witches. And Sarah has apparently this innate psychic talent, and with them they kind of, do some witchcraft, and stuff goes weird, and then Sarah decides she wants to leave their group, and then Nancy decides to kill her. And fun. That's kind of the shorthand, but I think actually an easier way to describe this film is Threefold the movie.
You're not wrong.
It's so if you haven't seen the movie The Craft, it's not. I'm gonna say this as a person who hated on this movie for years. It's actually not terrible. It's actually really fun, and you shouldn't hate this movie for the reasons that I hated it for years. But right now I watched it it's currently, as we record this, available to watch for free on Tubi, Tubi, with commercials, but it's free to watch on that streaming service in June of 2020. I don't know where that's going to be going forward. Like, literally while researching this episode, it moved free streaming services on me. So
Ooh.
I watched it once on the Roku channel and then the second time on Tubi. So we will absolutely be spoiling this film.
Oh yeah. But I mean, it's over 20 years old at this point, so.
But you can go see it for free right now. So go pause the episode, go watch The Craft if you haven't seen it, then come back to the episode.
Or watch it again if you've seen it before, just for a refresher, because it's fun.
Yeah, this is so. I think for me, the reason why I hated this movie for so long was the reason why, and people who've listened to the show and my Witchcraft on Television episode know that I still have some annoyances with the fact that real witchcraft is never represented in television and film, almost never. I think some people emailed me a couple of examples of side characters, but when the only examples of a quote-unquote realistic witch on television are the roommate from Felicity, it's not a long list.
Yeah.
And so it always still bothers me when the trappings of real witchcraft get dragged into kind of fantasy, because it clouds certain things, and this film is so guilty of it on so many levels. The film had a consultant, Pat Devin, she's a Dianic witch, who consulted on the film, and a lot of the rituals in this movie are literally straight out of Wicca 101 books, like calling the watchtowers, which
is not as complicated as they make it out to be.
Right? No, it's literally you can find this in every 90s Wicca book, but they specifically made sure that they were adhering to Wicca in all of the rituals, but without any of the faith components. And so it's and again, if you want to do witchcraft in a movie, I'll tell you, I watched the new Charmed. I'm a big fan of the new Charmed. I love Chilling Adventures of Sabrina. When you don't present it as Wicca, it doesn't bother me. You know what I mean? It's if you want to call your fantasy witchcraft, just do it. And obviously there's a lot of witchcraft that isn't Wicca, but when it gets into the specifics where you're literally using actual rituals, but then you just swap out the god and goddess for Manon.
Oh, I have opinions about that.
So the reason, and I'll tell you, there is, it's not a crazy reason that they went with Manon while still having witchcraft consultants. That was actually Pat Devin's, the Wiccan consultant's idea.
Really?
And the reason why is that she thought it would be too dangerous for them to use a real god, because people might accidentally start calling on, teenagers imitating the film might start calling on a real power, where if they called upon a made-up deity that they created for the movie, because they made it up, it wouldn't do anything, which again kind of goes against certain metaphysical theories about what deities actually are. So I mean, in theory, actually, if people started faithfully, there's an argument based on
there's such a thing as an egregore,
but that is dependent on the metaphysical model you're doing.
True.
I have a feeling Pat Devin's a literalist.
What boggles me just a little, especially with this movie coming out just when the whole sort of rediscovering the goddess thing was getting started in the late 90s, and having a Dianic witch as your consultant, and considering the movie sort of seemed to want to portray a sort of young rebellious feminist vibe with the main characters, but they chose to have a male presenting deity instead of invoking a goddess or making up a goddess. Part of me wonders if that's some sort of late 90s pop psychological choice on the part of the writers, but it always struck me as just a little bit odd.
Well, I think it's specifically because so this is theory. I don't have any confirmation of this. This is just my speculation. But Pat Devin, I mean, being a Dianic, where they effectively eschew the god in their practice by making it a masculine deity, wouldn't accidentally call on some aspect of the goddess. And so I think that point of view bleeds in there. But that's speculation on my part. I have no, I don't have a source for that.
Okay. Well, it was a big thing in psychology then to be like, the problem of literally any kid is that they don't have a good father figure.
Yeah.
And of all the girls in the movie, Sarah's the only one that has an actual present father. I mean, Nancy has a stepdad, but he's kind of a POS.
Well, we only see the full home lives of Nancy and Sarah. It's
right.
Bonnie, we see her mom taking her to doctor's appointments, but I don't think we ever have any information about whether or not Bonnie's father exists in any direction.
No.
And I don't think we see Rochelle's parents at all.
We do not.
No, it's really okay. So Nancy and Sarah are fully developed characters.
Yes,
but Bonnie and Rochelle are not remotely. It's Bonnie's entire character has scars, and Rochelle's entire character is black.
Yeah,
that's.
And they never really go any deeper into why they're there or what happened to them in the past that got them to where they are. They never explain why in this ostensibly kind of exclusive Catholic high school Rochelle is the only black student.
Well,
they don't well,
as a person who grew up in a school where I literally grew up a block and a half from the city of Milwaukee, in a public school there were very few black people.
Well, yeah, this seems like it's a sign-up school.
It's a parochial school. It's a Catholic school. It's literally there's a nun teaching. And most of the people going there seem to have money. Which actually makes some more question of how is Nancy affording to go there. There's no exploration of a scholarship or anything. She doesn't seem particularly studious. And
and why does Bonnie have scars?
Well, yeah, that's the whole thing is we don't get a backstory on Bonnie having scars. And but I think that I understand why there's not a lot of development for Bonnie and Rochelle. It's because it's a film, and in the 90s we actually made films of reasonable length. I will say that to a degree I kind of understood that the initial dynamic between the three, because as Sarah joins the group that already exists with Nancy, Bonnie, and Rochelle, Nancy I have seen a lot of real world groups that actually aren't that different in their toxicity and kind of structure, where you get one kind of damaged but charismatic person kind of leading in charge, and kind of the Nancy figure that other people who aren't necessarily as independent or as emotionally developed latch onto. But so I get the dynamic, and actually for a good chunk of the film, I think that there's one of the reasons why this film resonated is because the high schoolers largely act like high schoolers.
Yeah, and I was actually impressed. For the 90s, none of the four main characters look like they're 30, and that was the whole thing back then. It was you cast people in their mid to late 20s to play teenagers.
I mean, Robin, how old was
and
Robin?
Fun fact, actually, Scream came out that same year, which Neve Campbell was also in, and all of the teenagers were played by people who looked like they were approaching 30.
Robin Tunney was born in 1972. They shot this movie in 1995. She was definitely not a teenager when they made this film. It's fun fact. It's a fun thing to watch during this whole movie is look how bad Robin Tunney's wig is.
Oh my God, yes.
She is fresh off of Empire Records where she had a shaved head. And there's this one scene in which she has to I think it's when she tells Chris to fuck off, or if she tells him to fuck you, she spins around, and her hair kind of flies up, and you can see the different layers of the hair from the wig.
Oh no!
Like, it just, my brain, the first time I watched it, I was like, that's a wig. And like, I was like, that is so clearly a wig. That is the most wiggiest wig I have ever seen. Like,
and it's a 90s wig.
Like,
Oy.
I have seen better Arda wigs, and those are not expensive.
Oof. Burn.
I am not burning Arda wigs. Arda wigs are great, but
Oh no,
designed,
burn on the craft
yeah,
wig.
they are designed for cosplay, and like, no one, very few people buy an Arda, like, you don't buy a bright blue Arda wig because you want to convince people it's your real hair.
Sure.
It's, I mean, as a person who owns several Arda wigs, it's it's, I don't know, it, like, like, I have complaints about the film, obviously. Like, Sarah's casual dismissal of Chris's attempt to rape her is kind of,
yeah.
Like, I get that he's under a love spell, but that just, like, that doesn't make someone do that step. Like, that already has to be in him.
Yeah, I mean, at least they showed some sort of, like, mild trauma, like when she runs away and she shows up at Rochelle's house. She looks shook.
Yeah.
She looks rattled.
She does, yeah.
She doesn't just, kind of run away and go, oh, yeah, this happened. There's at least a reaction. And I'm sure, like, if it had happened earlier in the movie, there would have been more fallout from it, more reaction to it. But, I mean, as much as I'm, like, not entirely endorsing, shall we say, the way that Nancy went about getting him back for it, I completely support her decision to do so.
Yeah.
That's,
well,
even though she was going bonkers at the time, it's like, that's what a good friend does. You
sort
go
of,
and you heck up his life.
I sort of agree with you, but I also think that, like, I mean, and this again is Nancy's kind of going nuts at this point, but I feel like the screenwriters also, though, kind of played with still Nancy being jealous.
Oh,
in that scene, and it like that. It didn't. I can justify it as, like, character-wise, but it's still not great. It's like there's lots of stuff, though, that also doesn't really get handled well in the film, like Sarah's mental illness.
Yeah, that it's like alluded to.
We know
but
about
not
a suicide
really handled.
attempt, and we know it was a serious suicide attempt because, as they even quote in the movie, say she did it the right way, which I actually kind of appreciated that Nancy, in her attempt to make it look like she was killing herself, did it the wrong way.
Yeah.
I actually kind of liked it because, of course, she'd be that dumb. But, like, and also, like, the homeless guy feels like he's gonna be more important. Like,
yeah, and then he just gets run over.
And he's sort of, like, saying, like even if he had, like, if he had given some plot pressing details as right before he got run over, it would feel more earned. Like, because it is weird that this same homeless guy would be at her house, but then also at a random other part of Los Angeles.
Yeah. Not sure, like, how far apart those places are. They seem to walk a lot of places.
But, yeah.
I'm not sure if you can do that in LA. I have no idea of, like, what the city structure is, but...
I think it's safe to assume they're taking the bus between spots some of the time, because they do take the bus out to the, further location, so...
True. Oh, and I love that line, "We are the weirdos, mister." Oh, love it.
That is going in the shot from that's going in the thumbnail. Are you kidding me?
Girls, watch out for those weirdos.
We are the weirdos, mister.
That is, but I think that's one, like, I talk about, like, I criticize this film and, like, but that is why this film resonated, because it resonated with an entire generation of outcast people who felt weird, and young women especially really latched on to, and like it cannot be understated. Like there was let me see if I can find my source. So there's a research paper done in the early 2000s, Mass Media and Religious Identity, a case study of young witches that was written by Helen A. Berger and Douglas Ezzy, and they interviewed about 90 people, men and women ages 17 to 23, 30 each within the U.S., England, and Australia. And I think about a third of those were I'm going to say assigned male at birth, because I don't know their methodology well enough based on the fact that this was the early 2000s. But like a huge proportion of them, and this is actually one of my favorite things about this study, is that a huge number of them cited like how seeing themselves represented in visual media was a huge part of what got them into witchcraft. And many cited The Craft as one of the things that they had seen that was being influential, but a large number of them also did the back pedal. Oh, I loved The Craft. I saw it. But no, my religion wasn't really based like I didn't become a Wiccan because of the Craft, even though I saw that first and I just said it was heavily influential on my life. Like,
yeah, because if you told people, like you said, in the community that you got into it because of The Craft, oof, yikes.
Yeah, no.
There would be some discussion.
Like and The Craft, like The Craft was riding a wave, like in the sense that like witchcraft books were suddenly more available to a lot of people in the early and mid 90s because of big box retailers started carrying some witchcraft books. Mm-hmm. And obviously there was like getting more and more media attention. But The Craft, like, I think a big deal about The Craft is that witches are both the protagonist and antagonist in this movie. Like,
yes, you're
rooting, like, it starts out with, there's no direct antagonist. There's not, there are minor antagonists, but there's no central antagonist to turning one of the co-protagonists into the antagonist. And you're still rooting for a witch at the end of the movie. Like, Sarah is still a witch, and, we always, like, and the shop owner is always portrayed in a positive light. Like, there's never that twist that the shop owner was evil the whole time. Like,
yeah.
So, I do blame this movie for popularizing the idea of quote-unquote natural witches.
That's another thing I have opinions about. And especially when you get to that end point and she's in the shop with Lirio, who I always just adored as a character. I'm like, where was this when I was coming up? Where was my Lirio? I want to talk to someone like that. She seems nice, but she says, you hear the voice of your mother. She's telling you to be strong. She was a witch too, wait, what?
Like, why would you know that? You never met her mother.
And then of course it leads into, I think that actually led into some of the sort of hereditary witch claims that we started seeing. Or, well, I guess seeing, but that were prevalent among newer witches around the same time. Like,
I don't know. That's been a thing since Alex went and said, my grandma taught me. Why did I give him like
but this was like,
accent?
I haven't sorry. It's like, I have this unknown ancestor that, was secretly a witch or whatever. And just, was, and just the idea that, it can be passed down unknowing and then it manifests. That's something they play with in Charmed too. And
yeah, it's a major, that's a major thing though. But that's been around for a lot of like witch fiction and,
Oh yeah.
I mean, Gardner was passing down the bullshit about, ancient traditions at the start of the modern witchcraft movement. Everyone had a dead grandma. Everyone had a dead grandma. Remember, lady, the author of that long read poem, which is partially to blame for the threefold law getting folded into everything.
You don't say.
Yeah. Always claimed that her grandmother, either her grandmother or great aunt, I forget which, wrote the poem, not her, even though said person died before the foundation of Wicca or the creation of the phrase, and it harm none, do as you will. So, it's everybody had, like, it's the hereditary claims and fictions. Like, I feel more that was more in the script because that was already a thing. Like, the film may have, like, people may have gotten it through the game of telephone through the movie, but I just don't feel like it made it any worse.
Yeah, I suppose so. I suppose you're right. I had never encountered that concept before seeing the movie, so I guess maybe it just called my attention to something that was already there. I'll go ahead and make the confession. Hi, my name is Bree, and one of the things that first interested me in witchcraft seriously was this movie. It was formative, but not like the tipping point, but it was one of the things that was like, oh, wait, this is actually a thing? That's cool. Yeah. Let me look into it.
Well, and like, if teenage me saw this movie, because, as a person who was a teenager in the 90s, I would have hated this movie for the exact reasons that I hated it not seeing it. Mm-hmm. It's, I used to be kind of a dick. I need to, like, fully own up and confess that I was a gatekeeping elitist dick 20 years ago. Like, I became a very different person in regards to my witchcraft in my early 20s versus who I was as a teenager, mostly as I began to expose myself more to people who disagreed with me, and meeting witches who came up watching The Craft and loved it. And suddenly you're the only person in the room. Like, I was used to being like the person in the room where everyone disliked it, and then suddenly you're a person in the room full of witches and everybody loves the movie.
Oh yeah.
And you're just like, oh, maybe I respect these people in the room with me. Maybe I'm the asshole. Crap.
Yeah.
I should reevaluate how I'm looking at things and media regarding this. Like, it's the same reason why I went back and watched the entirety of Charmed. Still don't like it.
I'm just impressed you went back and watched the whole thing. That can be a tough series to get through.
And I will tell you, you don't even have the How Soon Is Now cover by Love Spit Love when you watch it on streaming. So yeah, here's another thing is, if you want to know how influential this movie is, it's that there's a cover of the Smiths' How Soon Is Now by the band Love Spit Love that was recorded for The Craft.
Mm-hmm.
It is in the trailer for The Craft, and it's in the movie, and it was the Charmed theme. Charmed used it. The reason it's not on streaming is because the contracts for that theme didn't include later distribution, because Charmed started in the late 90s, and they didn't think to ink that into contracts. You'll find a number of shows with changed soundtracks because of that when they get later released on streaming.
What's funny is the song isn't even over a scene of anything particularly witchy. It's literally the dude Chris at football practice.
Yeah, no, it's at football practice.
That's it.
But it's in the trailer. I think the reason why it latched on was because of it was in the trailer.
Oh yeah, and it's catchy as hell. I love that song.
Yeah, I genuinely like the Love Spit Love version better than the original. It's a better recording of the song.
That is criminally vulgar.
I know some Morrissey fan is going to come for me for that.
Yeah.
Well,
part of it is nostalgia. It's like, oh, this was connected with a cool thing, and so.
Well,
yeah.
But also, like, as a person who writes music myself, and like, the original song, it's a good song, but it's a tighter recording.
I'll give you that.
I'll
definitely give you that.
And also, they shifted the beat slightly. I have very detailed thoughts that could be their own episode if I was doing a music podcast, but this isn't that. So, and I will say the Craft soundtrack is actually really great. You got Letters to Cleo on there. You got Love Spit Love. It's like this is like from an era, like this is from that weird era where before they stopped having the soundtrack songs in the movie. So they had to always, like, if they wanted to put it on the soundtrack album, they had to actually put it in the film. Like, this is right before that changed. So it's like, I'm looking at you, Batman and Robin soundtrack.
Oh man, I remember here's my moment of shame. I actually really loved that movie because I didn't know any better. I went out and bought the CD, an actual physical CD, thinking, oh, the music from this, that, and the other thing is going to be on it, and it wasn't, and I was mad.
I own it.
And that was back when they cost like $25.
I also own that CD.
I feel less.
Hey, it was the only way to get that version of Foolish Games if you already owned the Jules Pieces of You, because everybody owned Jules Pieces of You because it was the 90s.
Oh yeah.
You literally, I will tell you, like, there was a point in my early 20s where I was between paychecks and just slightly under making the rent, so I sold a bunch of my CDs. No one would take Jules Pieces of You. No CD store, no used CD store would buy that, and they would just go, look at all these copies we have.
Yep.
We're not going to sell it. And so, yeah, I still own it somewhere in a box in a closet. Same with the Batman and Robin soundtrack.
Oh my gosh.
Well, then I was also a Smashing Pumpkins fan, and that was on there too. Before Billy Corgan became terrible. I mean, he was probably a bad person the whole time, but we just didn't know because Twitter didn't exist. There you
go.
But to get back to the Craft.
Yes.
This is going to be a long episode. People who always bug me to do longer episodes, well, this is what happens when you get a longer episode. But so, like, it's to get back to the point, though, that Love Spit Love song, because it was in the Craft trailer, they used it as the Charmed theme.
Yes.
Because, again, while Witchcraft was growing, the Craft blew it up on levels that, like, it's so hard to, like, even understand. Like, the Witchcraft boom of the 90s it started on its own, but this was really a triggering point. This was such a huge explosion on the market to the point that, again, people are still writing articles about this, and people did academic studies like specifically about this. It's remarkable. It
really is.
But of course, the remake started shooting in October of last year.
Ooh, I'm excited for that.
Which I am my opinion.
You sound conflicted. Let's explore that.
Oh, I want to see it. I don't know if it's a necessary film, because first off, actually watching The Craft, like, again, I had avoided this movie intentionally. Like, I've seen Practical Magic. I like Practical Magic. I have complaints about Practical Magic. That'll be a different episode. The next time I do 3 really dark episodes in a row. But, like, the craft actually ages really well. Like,
to a point,
as a
yeah,
film.
it does.
Like, there's problematic stuff in there, like, don't get me wrong, but actually, like, I mean, I feel like, and maybe I can't speak for black people, obviously, as a white person, and, like, we're recording this in early June of 2020, so look at a history book if you're listening to this later. But I feel like I knew racists in high school. Okay? I was not friends with them, but I knew them. And I feel like the racism isn't quite accurately portrayed for 90s high school racism. Like, is that a weird criticism? Like,
no, I don't
racists-
think it is. I think you're absolutely right. It's very sort of light. And I mean, I don't want to like downplay anyone's experience. I'm sure that, you know, what Rochelle went through was something that lots and lots of people have gone through. It was just, I don't know, there was something very plastic about it.
It's also
almost
like the phrases she used, like the
very
that
sort of
character,
dated.
like, but also like they weren't the way that like
teenage girls don't talk that way.
What rich white teenage girls in the 90s who were racist, which there were plenty of them. Don't get me wrong. Again, I've met some of these people. It's didn't use, like, I feel like the language was poorly researched. I feel like they were, well, and it is a fact that the character wasn't written as black in the initial script, and they tacked on the racism plot when they cast that part. So that's just some.
That is a thing. Jeez, I actually I feel for Rachel True, the actress who played Rochelle. She got shut out of like award shows and, you know, panels and things that had to do with the craft. Like they won an award, I believe, for the movie, and like the other three girls were called up on stage to get it, and she just was like somewhere way back in the audience and wasn't with them. Like, they've been called to do panels for things, and she'll be conveniently left off the guest list. She's talked about it a number of times, and it's just like, why? Well, we know why.
Yeah, we know
it's
why.
Bullshit, but it's, you know, we know why. And it's like, no, that's not right. I mean, she was right there in it. She's an integral part of the movie. I love her character, and just it's really obnoxious.
Yeah,
but the world sucks.
The world is terrible, and
the world is terrible.
I think that it's, well, the problem is the real problem that I have with the, and the real problem I should have in the real world is the treatment of Rachel True. But the problem I have in the film, the problem I have with the film, is that Christine Taylor's character, Laura, is either the problem is that she needs to be more racist if she's going to use that kind of like the specific wording she uses, which I don't necessarily like want to repeat. The words and phrases she uses are either like they're too strong for the amount of racism she shows, or she's not showing enough racism to be the kind of person who uses them.
That makes sense, I guess. It could also be that there were other scenes they meant to put in that got cut.
Well, but since they added the racism,
true.
I think it's just a matter of screenwriters who don't know how to accurately depict racists outside of cartoons, not examining their own racism, most likely. But, you know...
Shocking.
Heyo. Hot take here. Racism is bad. this was a mediocre portrayal of it.
Probably because the writers had never experienced it themselves.
Yeah.
Just speculating.
But it's such a this film has had such a weird echo, and I think it had such a life on VHS and DVD. In part, so here's my favorite thing.
Wait. Does this count as an actual cult classic?
Well,
or is it an occult classic?
But it also did financially well enough when it came out that it would actually just be considered a hit.
I know. I just wanted to make the pun.
Because it made like 3 times its budget back at the box office.
Nice.
Yeah, it's but it's the fact that it was rated R. This movie's rated R. And I think a lot of people forget that. And this film should not have been rated R.
I'm surprised by that. What about this film is rated R?
The witchcraft. I'm not kidding.
For heaven's sake.
It is rated R for some terror and violence and brief language. But
there isn't even that much swearing in the movie.
There's not. They specifically made this movie to be PG-13 because they knew it would resonate with a teenage audience. They wanted teenagers to see this film when they made this movie. But and actually, like, you go into other countries and depending on which Canadian province it is, some ones it's rated like rated R, and some it's rated 13 plus. It was in the Netherlands originally rated as like 16 and then re-rated later at their 12 rating. Because this movie was made to be a PG-13 movie but got an R rating because, and for reasons most people think it has to do with the witchcraft. It has been revealed, if you watch, there's a documentary about the rating system, which I cannot remember what it's titled, but it's a fascinating thing because the MPAA keeps their raters secret, or at least has for a long time. I don't know if that's changed, but at least as of when the documentary was made, and definitely during the 90s, they kept who their ratings board were a secret because they're meant to be like average people, but some of the people on the rating board, at least at the time, like at least 10 years ago, were there was clergy.
Oh, geez.
So the theory is that it was because of the witchcraft, purely because of the witchcraft.
Sake.
This movie was rated R most likely purely because of the witchcraft scene. So if you are a parent who has not seen The Craft, although honestly, if you are a parent of if you are old enough to be someone's parent who's a teenager looking into watch movies, and you're listening to this podcast, you've already seen The Craft. But if you haven't, if you are some weirdo like me who made it to their late 30s without ever seeing this film, it really should be rated PG-13. So if you're okay with your kid seeing a PG-13 movie, it's fine. There's no nudity in this. There's no swearing. The language is pretty mild by modern standards.
Incredibly mild. The language is barely PG-13. Like, you could probably get away with it on weeknight television now.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. But again, we are talking, it's the mid-90s. We're at the late stages of the Satanic Panic. Mm-hmm. We are... It is a witchcraft movie, which the protagonist is also a witch.
Yeah, and witches in a Catholic school, no less.
I know.
Actually, in the 90s, that would have been really, really controversial.
Well, you know what? The Catholic school part, the school being Catholic, I barely even noticed the first time I watched it. It's the inclusion of a school uniform is the only point. Oh,
yes. I mean, I went to public school my entire school career. but I look at their uniforms, and even just the way that that Nancy's wearing her uniform in their like little introductory scene, I'm like, that is so many demerits. How did they even? And then later on, when they accessorize and like wear regular shirts and stuff with their uniform skirts or whatever, I'm like, even on a dress down day, they would have been like in detention. Parents would have been called. How are they getting away with wearing lipstick? It boggles me, but that's Hollywood.
I mean, I figured the writer was a dude and the director was a dude.
Yeah, there you go.
And I don't know if you've noticed this, but there are a lot of gross men in Hollywood.
No.
No, shocking, right?
Shocking.
Right? Like, who would have thought?
Oh, especially in the 90s, because they were still keeping that nonsense under wraps, that no one was talking about it yet. But just, bleh.
Yeah. No, that was a...
Actually, considering that, maybe it was sort of a blessing that they weren't having teenagers playing teenagers, considering the crap that was going on.
Yeah.
That still is going on. Bleh. Gross.
But I will say, like, so... And this is like a complete, like, I feel like I should have organized my discussion thoughts better, but I didn't. And so this is the episode y'all are getting, and I love you for listening. I think actually the problem that bothered me with Bonnie, this is the thing that bothered me with Bonnie, is they comment on how, like, Sarah comments on her getting so shallow now that her scars are gone. But, like, I feel like there's not enough establishment for that line. Like, that like, you could have just not even mentioned that. Like, because, like, we don't have that with, Rochelle's stuff. Like, she just feels kind of bad because she's ruined, because their spells ruined, you know, the racist's life. But
well, I mean,
but like, you know, but there's no real, like, personality problems for Rochelle. Like, so it's like, so Nancy's becoming shallow now that her scars are gone. Not Nancy, Bonnie. Words.
Right.
This is my brain. Don't at me. Like, Bonnie becoming shallow, like, why is... Hey, I feel like it's an okay mix-up, because at one time Sarah calls Bonnie Nancy in the introductions in the beginning. So it's a callback, not a mistake.
Well, we'll just call it that.
But I feel like it's such a weird... Because it's not established enough. Like, you literally could have just not had Sarah say that line. You know what I mean? Like, if Sarah had just not called her out, because the only thing they do to establish that is that Bonnie checks out a guy's ass in an earlier scene. Yeah,
that's it. And I mean, I probably would have, like, been reveling in, you know, new confidence and everything too if I was in her position. And yeah, I'd flirt with a stranger because of it, more than likely.
But also, that seems like she's more confident, and maybe you could argue more sexually aggressive, but that doesn't make a person more shallow. Like, she didn't, like... Also, we don't know that she wasn't that shallow before. Like, there's nothing to... Like, she felt embarrassed and sad, but it's not like we saw her making deep, critical insights about strangers based on, like...
That's true.
Like, we have no signs of her having any depth before that point. And we have no signs that she has lost that depth at that point. It's just a line that's, like, meant to be like the girls are getting worse, but you can see that they're, like, more kind of, like, they're already kind of in a drunken thrall. Like, it's already being shown. You don't need to tell. Like, that they are kind of, you know, intoxicated on the high of their magic usage. And, like... The scene with the stoplights, like, gives you that, as they don't even notice the danger they're in while they're, like, goofing around in the back seat.
Yeah, I actually really liked sort of the symbolism in that scene. I know that that's a thing that most people just hate to look for in movies and literature. But I really liked that. It's that they're getting all these red lights, and Nancy ostensibly keeps changing them to green, and then Sarah says one of these times it's not going to be green.
Yeah.
It's like, I really enjoyed that. It's like you're getting all these danger signals and you're ignoring them and pushing through them. And
yeah, no, that's
yeah,
good.
Just the writer in me really likes it.
It's I think that there's like some solid stuff there. I do think that this is really, like I said it before at the beginning, this is Threefold the movie. This is the Threefold Law in movie form, which the Threefold Law, by the way, is a later tack on to Wicca. And while a lot of Wiccans believe in it, a lot of us don't, because it's a misinterpretation of like, if you look at where it came from, like, and this is to, like, there's a lovely episode about of Hex Positive, episode 3, where Bree talks about this. So
I believe there's a lovely episode of BS Free Witchcraft that talks about it as well.
Yeah, but they should listen to that before they get to this episode. No, I'm just kidding. Listen to my episodes in whatever order you want. But
yes, it really is the Threefold Law, the movie.
Yeah, and it's I hate uncritically parroting that, but also, like, this goes back to the whole idea that, like, okay, so I'm not a person who believes in the Threefold Law. I'm not, because it doesn't make sense when you look at the way that, like, so, like, the reed, and it harm none, do as you will, that is not handed down from a higher power. Like, that is the Wiccan Reed was written by, like, it came out of Gardner. Like, he made some quotes that Doreen Valiente crafted down to a nice pithy phrase. So I mean, like, but it came from people, like, and it's not a divine, like, it's not a divine instruction. It's not even divine advice. It is literally other witches. It's literally other witches saying, don't hurt other people.
Yeah, and it's down to a very narrow number of witches making an interpretation of things that Gardner and Valiente said and put forth. We're looking at you, Buckland.
So the Wiccan Reed is literally advice from another Wiccan.
Mm-hmm.
The Threefold Law claims to, be this universal, like, the Reed doesn't say the universe works like this. The Reed says, hey, if you're going to be a Wiccan, you should do this as being part of being a Wiccan. Like, it's like, it's not an instruction. It is a moral code for a group of people. A self-chosen moral code. Mm-hmm. The Threefold Law, that is supposed to be this entire metaphysical construct that permeates all of reality and existed before Wicca did. If you believe in it, like, it's like the level of, like, it's an entire, it's a metaphysical construct based on a misinterpretation of a piece of fiction.
Yep.
That's not, I'm pretty sure that's not how this works.
Pretty sure that's not how it works either.
I mean, I guess you could justify in a metaphysical model where if you as a person practicing witchcraft who believes in the Threefold Law would then build into your own practice that your own magic would cause threefold upon yourself. That actually does make sense. But you're doing it to yourself. Yeah. Insert the GIF.
Yes. And I mean, even in the movie, when Lirio, the shop owner, when she talks about their interpretation of the Threefold Law, all she says is, well, then understand this: whatever you give out, you get back ×3. And it's like, first of all, no.
But also, it doesn't make sense.
And also,
she also in another part of the movie says magic is neither good nor bad.
Yeah. Ugh. and it's all about what's in the heart of the witch, and it's like, I get it, and also it could be seen sort of as an indictment of the mentality of teenage girls, and like how, when we were younger, we were all, impetuous and dumb and hot-headed, and that's just a part of, learning and growing up. At some point, you're going to do something dumb, but still.
I did mention I was an elitist dick as a teenager, like.
Yeah, but it's like...
I hid it well. A lot of people didn't know I was, but I was. Maybe I didn't hide it so well. I should go ask high school friends.
I think there's also, like... I think Lirio had been seeing Nancy and co. coming in for ages. She knew they were, like, wholesale stealing her stuff. She probably had some inkling that they weren't acting responsibly, or at the very least that they were, like, likely to get in over their heads because of their behavior, because, teenagers.
That is not a good way to run a business, though. If you've got 3 people you see on the regular shoplifting from you, like, and magic's real...
Yeah, it's like, if magic is that real and that, like, visibly prevalent in that world, you'd think she'd be able to do something about it, or at least, like, bar them from the store.
Right, like, at least, like, bind them from being able to come into her place of business. Like, I'm not talking about, like, even if you play by, like, you don't want to, again, like, the anti-hexing and anti-baneful magic stuff. I'm stealing baneful magic from you. I'm taking it.
Please do. It's a useful phrase.
Yeah, it's like, it's even if, like, you're anti-cursing and all that stuff, like, you can still protect a space from shoplifting because clearly magic is real, right? Like,
I would think that any self-respecting witchy shop owner in that particular iteration of the universe would, like, have anti-shoplifting charms on their shop.
Right, because clearly she doesn't have a lot of customers, so she needs to make that margin on every item. Like,
yes.
Because
and looking at the shop, it's like there's not a lot in there. There's, like, a few tables of, like, some candles and herbs and, like, a smattering of books. I didn't see jewelry or expensive accoutrements. How is this woman staying in business?
And I've been in witch shops like that. They all went out of business. But also, like, it's like there are never any other customers.
Yeah.
Like, she's always there. Like, every time we go in there, the character, whether it be Sarah on her own or all of them, like, there's never anyone else in the store. Like, there never happens to be another customer walking out. Like, it's...
And do you also get the feeling that Lirio, like, lives above the shop?
Well, she has to if her ritual space is in there.
Yeah. And she's also, like, there in the middle of the night when Sarah shows up.
Also,
when she freaks out at the end.
Yeah, and if you're going to have, like, a private ritual space, put a door with a lock on it. So customers don't accidentally walk in there. And also, that's a blacklight party.
Yes.
90s aesthetic production design. I'm like, this doesn't match what we've seen of Lirio. Like, we enter this room and I'm just like, this, and maybe, like, it's like, this feels like her outfit is wrong for this room. Like, I have met witches who would have a ritual space like that, and I have met witches who would dress like Lirio. The people who dress, no, this does not match. This is
drapey, like, sleeves and dozens of candles do not mix.
Well, and Pat Devin was not the only witch on set for this movie because, and I'm gonna mispronounce her name so badly because I've never tried to say it out loud. Fairuza Balk, who plays Nancy. You can please correct me on my pronunciation of her name.
It's close enough. I think it's Fairuza.
Fairuza, okay. I've just never tried to say it out loud, I realized, just as I was about to say it.
Yeah, it's a very unique name. I don't know
but yeah,
where it comes from, but it's kind of cool.
she is a practicing witch. At least she was in the 90s. I don't believe that anyone's bothered to ask her in an interview since then.
True. Although she, from what I understand, she got into it after doing this movie.
Yeah. Well, yeah, she'd been, if you read her bio stuff, she'd been interested in it before, but then also really got into it during this movie. That, if I was imagining a ritual space, like her, I would imagine, like if I saw the ritual space, I'd imagine a witch who looked like Nancy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of. We do get to see Nancy's working space, which is, it basically looks like a vanity that's just covered with pictures and clippings and just candles everywhere. She has a really small little working space because her family's got like basically a trailer.
I felt like that ritual space looks pretty accurate.
Yeah.
For, you know.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's maybe the candles are a little too expensive.
Maybe a lot of it looked like, kind of found stuff. And yeah, maybe some of the stuff is expensive, but obviously they're stealing it. So
right, yeah, that's true. She's stealing from the witch shop all the time.
Yeah, so of course she has like
just
nice things she might not afford.
Just a pro tip for witches: don't steal your magical supplies from witches, because in real life, that's just a bad idea. Because I'll tell you, if I was running a witch shop and someone was stealing magical supplies from me, there'd be a little curse on every single one of them.
Mm-hmm. And also just, support small businesses.
And cleanse your tools.
Yes. Oh my God. Yes. Oof. Jeez. Speaking of tools, the ritual on the beach. What did you think of that?
It certainly quoted a lot of Witchcraft 101 stuff. In fact, maybe I'll play a clip from the movie right now.
Mm-hmm.
For the listeners, not for us.
Aww.
I don't have it queued up.
That's okay. I can hear it in my head.
Hail to the guardians of the watchtowers of the east, the powers of air and invention. Hear me!
Us.
Hear us.
Hail to the guardians of the watchtowers of the south, powers of fire and feeling. Hear us! Hail to the guardians of the watchtowers of the west, powers of water and intuition. Hear us!
Hail to the guardians of the watchtowers of the north by the powers of mother and earth. Hear us. Aid us in our magical working on this May's Eve. Serpent of old, ruler of deep, guardian of the bitter sea, show us your glory. Show us your power. We pray of thee. We pray of thee. We invoke thee.
Yeah, it's my thoughts with that comes into a lot of the parroting the structure of Wicca without actually being Wiccan. You know what I mean? It's, again, like, that's the stuff that bothered me when I was younger. And it still bothers me today. Like, with the remake, that's really what I think is going to be interesting, is whether or not they try to, like, how much of the trappings they decide to keep. And then, like, do they skew it away from Wicca or more towards Wicca? Like, that's going to be the interesting question, because, like, while the listeners of the show and obviously you're not a Wiccan. I'm a Wiccan though, and like listeners of the show, there are many flavors of witch across the modern witchcraft movement.
Yes.
In fact, actually, like, if anything, I'd credit this movie for causing people to be interested in witchcraft who then didn't stick to Wicca, because the reaction to people getting into this movie there was a general kind of hostility from Wiccans, after this film, which I think has actually led to more people identifying as witches but not Wiccan afterwards. That's just a random thought. I did that thing where I started to lose my train of thought because I got sidetracked by another interesting train of thought. Let's see if I can loop back here.
You were mentioning you were wondering if they were going to stick closer to Wicca in the new one.
Because as I was saying, it's the listeners of the show, we know the nuances of the witchcraft movement and that Wiccans are only a section of it, but I'm pretty 100% certain that Hollywood is not super aware that not all witchcraft is Wicca. It's gotten better with Charmed, like the remake of Charmed, like stripped out like the Wicca stuff versus the original Charmed. Like it's so that's and listen to my Witchcraft on Television episode if you want my full opinions on Charmed, because I'm not going to keep talking about that. But like, so are they gonna overcorrect? What direction are they gonna try to correct to? Like, are they just gonna straight like use a bunch of Wicca trappings but just do Manon and not like go deeper, or are they going to do something like try to make it like pure Gardnerian bullshit and like
God, I hope not.
But I mean, like, or like where in the spec? Or are they gonna go like? Are they going to do what Charm did and strip out the Wicca references and just make it witchcraft? I mean, I should say that the craft never says the word Wicca, but if you're like directly invoking like language out of Wiccan rituals that a lot was written for Wiccan rituals, like you're invoking Wicca even if you're not using the name. So I want to like, that's what I'm really curious about that film when it comes out, is whether or not, whenever it comes out, it's 2020, y'all.
And this year has just been a mess. So I mean, who can say?
Yeah.
I mean, at least we've seen with Sabrina that they're at least willing in the film industry now to explore the less than friendly aspects of it in a storytelling context. So maybe
Sabrina's interesting, because the comic it's based off is set in the 60s, and so though like the occult magic that they're doing in like, especially in like the early spoilers for Sabrina, for Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, it's like the occult flavor and the very like more Crowley stuff like feels more authentic to 60s witchcraft. You know what I mean?
Yeah, kind of.
And then when they made the series, they wanted to keep it true to that. Like, obviously there's some major plot point differences between the series and the comic it's based off of. Because, you know, while the character Sabrina the Teenage Witch has been in comics for a very long time, the series is specifically based off of the Chilling Adventures of Sabrina reboot. That they kept that kind of tone of the 60s witchcraft, but set it in the modern day. Which actually, like, people were really trying to figure out what year it was in that show when it came out, because, like, obviously they very much tried to keep the 60s aesthetic to, like, the fashion, the cars, but, you know, smartphones show up. And also there are references to, you know, even Night of the Living Dead is an early reference in the series, which, you know, was made in the 70s. So, like, what year was Night of the Living Dead made?
It's a good question. I don't know offhand. But that does raise an interesting question. Do you think that they will try to keep like the 90s witchcraft aesthetic for the new craft?
Well, I really think we're going to go full witch talk. I think there's enough, like, there's enough witch talk out there and witch blur and social media witchcraft that, you know, and people watching Harmony Nice, and that,
oh boy.
I think it's going to skew gothier because it's the craft.
True.
But there's still plenty of gothy teenage witches. It's going to be Instagram aesthetic blog stuff.
Yeah. Probably. Actually, if you think about it, so many of the gifts, yes, I say it, gifts,
we say gifts
from the
in this
craft,
house.
they show up on like Instagram and Tumblr posts about witchcraft just as, ooh, isn't this pretty? And I'm like, that's from the craft. That's from the craft. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's
just, oh. I can't help but wonder if they're going to try and like parrot another like actual ritual and cause another storm, because you know you see wind and stuff in that scene, and yeah, it's special effects, but like the ocean is also going crazy, and that wasn't special effects.
Yeah.
So it's like it's what you said. It's like you may not be calling upon it by name, but you're still calling upon something.
Yeah.
Because you're saying the right words.
Right. Well, and I mean, at least in my, you know what though, I will say this, that it depends on, in my metaphysical models, and I don't speak for every witch, is that I think that the belief in what you're doing is an important factor in whether or not a ritual does something. So if you just say the words to a ritual, but you're not trying to cast it, like, and you don't believe you are casting it, then you're not casting it. You're just saying the words.
Agreed. Mm-hmm.
So
which makes one wonder what Miss Bulk was up to.
Well, but also if everyone on set is spooked already,
mm-hmm.
then that's fueling the energy of the ritual. Just because you only see the actors on screen doesn't mean that if something real was happening, that everyone there wasn't fueling it too.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
I mean, and also though it's the ocean. It just does.
Yeah,
stuff.
that's true.
I make no statement. I honestly think a lot of the stuff with the hype about we're so worried about the magic and the craft was marketing. You cannot believe a single story that came out of a movie in the 90s or even now. Like when they talk about we were doing magic and it was so real that a bunch of bats flew overhead right as we invoked the thingamajig. I'm sorry, but if you're trying to sell me a product on how realistic the witchcraft is, that's the exact story you're going to tell me to try to get me to buy it.
Yeah, that's true.
And maybe that's just me being I can be a little bit of a skeptic. I have often described as there are many things that I believe that if someone else told me, I wouldn't believe them. So my own personal experiences where I'm we you were on our last October episode, the last time we talked about ghost stories on this podcast. And
mm-hmm.
again, I have said many, many times that if someone else told me my own stories that I know I experienced, I might not believe them at all. I might go, uh-huh. I wouldn't be rude, but I might go, uh-huh. But and that's my own
nod
stuff.
And smile.
Yeah. So it's I take everything with 10 grains of salt.
Yeah, me too.
I'm not gonna
I know I have a tendency to be skeptical, sometimes even a little bit cynical, but I don't know, sometimes I just love a good story.
So this is wound up being a lot longer than I meant to make this episode.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we should probably wrap this up. Bree, so The Craft, it was a movie, it was a thing, it was massively influential. They're making
mm-hmm.
a new one. The new one, here's what's going to happen with the new one. There's going to be a massive backlash from fans of the original Craft who think it's not as good. That's what's going to happen. So you're going to get a whole generation of witches. Oh, this is my favorite thing. This is what's going to happen. A whole generation of witches who got poo-pooed for liking the Craft when they got into it, who are going to poo-poo people for watching the new The Craft because it's not the original.
Mm-hmm.
This is my call. Witchblur 2021 or whenever this movie comes out. That's what we're going to see.
Oh yeah, and we're gonna start seeing it all over, TikTok as well. Oh boy, there's going to be a lot to unteach and a lot to unravel. We're going to have to roll up our sleeves.
I just have decided that I am too old to ever try TikTok. I'm 39.
Same.
I'm just like, I don't want to watch it. Like, I get it. Like, I totally 100% get it because I understood Vine. I understand YouTube. I get it. But I am not going to produce content on this platform. And, because honestly, who would watch it? I am best heard and not seen.
I would, but my video editing skills are not nearly that good. So
yeah, but anyways.
Also, I feel like conversations on witchcraft ought to be longer than 10 seconds.
Yeah, they should. TikTok is not a good platform. TikTok is a great platform for funny videos and entertainment. It is not a great platform for serious discussions about metaphysics and the ethics of witchcraft. That's what podcasts are for. That's what we're for here at the Nerd and Tie Network, which we should wrap this up. So, Bree, why don't you tell folks where they can find you on the internet?
Oh boy. Well, as you mentioned, you can find me on the Nerd and Tie Podcast Network over at Hex Positive. That's nerdandtie.com/hex. You can also find me on Twitter at Bree Nick-Garin, or you can follow the Hex Positive Show Twitter, which is at Hex_podcast. And we're going to have a bunch of new stuff coming out for the podcast real soon. You might be hearing some familiar voices. And there's lots and lots to look forward to.
That's exciting. And remember, you can follow this show on Twitter at TRAEGORN. That's me there. You can follow this show on Tumblr at traegorn.tumblr.com. And remember, you can, of course, always support this show on Patreon. This show is brought to you by lovely patrons like you. Without your support, we couldn't afford to pay the bills around here at BS Free Witchcraft. If you become a contributor to our Patreon at any tier, you get access to episodes like this, like early, whether it be like a week or a few days, depending on when I get the edit done. But you always get the episode before everybody else. Whether you're at the $1 tier or one of the high fancy tiers. If you choose to jump in at the $10 tier, you get a witchy shout out every episode. And our current fun supporters at that level are Meg Tenhulsen and Bruce Norville. So thank you, Meg and Bruce, for your support of the show. You help keep the lights on here. If you can't afford to support the show on Patreon, I totally get it. I don't know if you've noticed, but there's a global pandemic, massive unemployment, and riots in the streets.
Protests in the streets.
I don't see the word riot as a negative thing.
Fair.
I am very angry. Black Lives Matter.
Yes.
So if you can't financially support the show, totally get it. And there are a lot of good causes out there that might need your money more than my little podcast. If you can't support us, remember, you can always help support the show just by sharing the podcast link to your friends, sharing our social media. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention, you can also follow the show on Facebook at facebook.com/bsfreewitchcraft. Share the link to our websites of either bsfreewitchcraft.com or nerdandtie.com/bsfreewitchcraft. Either of those. Tell people about it. Tell your friends. Share us on whatever social media platforms you're on, and just get the word out about the thing, because it's a fun thing and a neat thing. And that is, I guess, I don't think I've forgotten anything. Do you want to say anything else, Bree?
Stay safe out there, and remember to wash your hands.
And so with that, until next time, I will talk to all of Magicians later.